Hey, in this video, I want to talk about some fake signs and particularly fake thermometers that are out there in pretty much every antique mall, every flea market you go to. And I want to help you avoid buying these. I was out buying today, picked up a legit old Coca-Cola sign, but I saw a fake sign. Or fake thermometer. I did not take video of it, but I decided to make a video about it. Now, most of you probably know that they're making a lot of fake porcelain signs right now. Porcelain signs are coming in by the pallet load, the tanker load from China or in India and different places, and those are pretty obvious, and there's ways to tell the good porcelain from the bad porcelain a lot of times in terms of font size, where the grommet holes are, and all that kind of stuff. Of course, that's getting harder and harder. They're making better ones, but the signs I want to talk to you about were made in the 1980s, or the thermometers, they were made in the 1980s. So now they have 40 years of patina, 40 years of history of, oh, this was hanging in grandma's, kitchen since the 80s when I was a little boy. Those stories, the story may be true, but the piece still isn't real. Before we dive into the fake thermometers, I want to talk a little bit about fakes in the antiques business in general, and sort of the difference between fake, fantasy, reproduction, late, and whether those terms actually matter. So let's dive into that. Pretty much as soon as something has value, there are fakes being made. Did you know that Ruth Webb Lee first published her book Antique Fakes and Reproductions in 1938? 1938. So fakes aren't new, even though people often think they started in the 1970s or later. It's actually a good book and well worth a read. It's important enough that it's gone through many different printings, and the 1966 edition can be had for a few bucks. Early reproductions in America included blown glass, powder horns, scrimshaw, and early colonial furniture. Powder horns and scrimshaw can be particularly deceiving because they'll take an old piece and add better decoration, similar to taking plain old pantry boxes and painting it blue. Some of you might be surprised to know how many fake painted country antiques are out there. The blue painted fakes probably outweigh the real blue painted stuff at this point. But again, it's just the paint that's fake. So lots of advertising collectibles were made after 1938 and still very desirable. Petretti's Coke book talks about fantasy items being made in the 1960s and 70s. Pocket knives and belt buckles were among those items made. Now those items have 50 years of history and patina. Petretti defines fantasy as a new item made to look like an old item, but that old item never existed in the first place. So not only fake, but not a reproduction, because a reproduction would be a copy of a legit old item. As a collector, there's nothing wrong with having a reproduction, because in some cases, the legit old versions are too pricey. The problem occurs when the reproduction is aged with rust or scratches to look older. Maybe the date is worn off and the item is sold as real. Any item described as late is still real. You could have a worms for sale bait shop sign from the 1980s, and it'll be late, as long as that sign, actually hung outside of a bait shop and was used as a legit sign. Now, something was just made decorative, even if it was, made decorative in the 1980s or something, that's no longer late. That's just a fake or a fantasy or a reproduction. The problem with late signs is that it's much easier to fake a 1980s sign than it is, particularly a wood sign, than it is to fake a 1920s wood sign. So that brings us to the thermometers in question. All of these thermometers were made and sold in the 1980s. I've seen that they were sold at Kmart. I don't know if that was entirely at Kmart or if they showed up at other retailers. These are not late and real, as some sellers will claim. They were made to be sold as decorative. They were not made to be used as real advertising. They are not 1960s either. These thermometers show up at pretty much every flea market, antique mall, and outdoor antique show in America. At least one of them, it seems like. The Pepsi and the mail pouch seem to be the most common. Some have different color backs. The Packard one seems less common than those two. The Nash and horse liniment seem to be the hardest to find. I'm sure there are others. These just seem to be the 5 that show up the most. Like I said, these show up everywhere and in various conditions. So while they may look old or have 40 years of rusting from being outside, they are not real. They are reproductions or fake or fantasy, depending upon your definition. They were not given to retailers of those products to be used as advertising. They were sold as decoration. They may have rust and a good story, but they are not old or real. The Pepsi one is probably the most convincing one because the product could conceivably be from the 1960s, especially if you don't know the history of the Pepsi logo. The horse liniment and Packard are clearly supposed to be 1920s or earlier products, but a metal that looks to be from the 1970s or later, they should fool less people than they do. Anyway, it's a short video, I know, but hopefully a little primer onto the world of fakes in the antiques business, but especially involving these thermometers that, like I said, they show up everywhere. So be on the lookout. Don't get fooled. They have different colored backs, and they're still all fake. Especially, like I said, those Pepsi one, and they just show up everywhere. So be careful out there. Buy from dealers you know and trust. Buy from dealers that have a return policy, I guess. Join Facebook groups and ask fellow collectors, or ask fellow collectors in person what they think of stuff, and they'll tell you. And like I said, try to buy from dealers that guarantee their stuff. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit like and subscribe. I'm a nomadic antique dealer traveling across the country, staying in different places and setting up at shows and flea markets, and no home base as of now, but my girlfriend, dog, and I travel across the country. We're currently in Western Ohio, but going to be heading up to New England this summer for sure. So maybe you'll see me on the road. And if you do, please say hi. But like I said, like and subscribe. Peace.